25 years since a 25-year-old rap star was gunned down in Las Vegas.
Tupac was an icon. He's probably the most gifted rapper in history, at least one of the most iconic rappers in history, and he meant a lot culturally.
Tupac Shakur was on top of the world, his music and his mentality striking a chord with millions.
If I can't live free, if I can't live with the same respect as the next man, I don't want to be here, because God has cursed me to see what life should be like.
His death, stunning. His legacy, ongoing. Tonight, a 13 Investigates special. Lost Soul, 25 years since the murder of Tupac Shakur. His high-profile death, his lasting impact. How friends, family, and law enforcement remember his life and death. It has been 25 years to the night since the focus here in Las Vegas quickly shifted from a Mike Tyson fight to a shooting just off the Strip. Rap superstar Tupac Shakur's life had just been taken. I'm Trisha Keene. It is a murder that was shrouded in mystery for years. But tonight, we answer some long simmering questions about the death of a music icon. From the start, the deck was stacked against Tupac Shakur. He was born in East Harlem, New York on June 16, 1971, and life was tough. His mother was in jail while she was pregnant with him. He was exposed to violence in his early years, experiences that later fueled his lyrics.
All eyes on me.
Tupac's family would eventually move to the Bay Area, and in 1991, Tupac broke into the music scene with a group called Digital Underground. A solo career was soon to follow. Within 5 years, he grew to become a giant in gangsta rap and hip-hop. His songs gave a voice to the voiceless. It struck a chord, this mix of aggressive lyrics and social commentary. With a me-against-the-world mentality, his music connected with millions around the world, but all who loved him would soon lose him. September 7th, 1996, Tupac, members of his hip-hop group The Outlaws, Suge Knight and other friends came to Las Vegas. It was fight night. Tupac's close friend, boxing great and Las Vegas resident Mike Tyson taking on Bruce Seldon. A fight outside the ring would overshadow the event.
A fist fight occurs between Tupac and an individual named Orlando Anderson, who was a Crip, and Tupac's entourage also jumps in and starts to assault Orlando.
If you beat up a guy like that, you better have your head on a swivel, because he's going to come back looking for you, and that's exactly what happened.
Both Las Vegas Metro Police and the LA Police Department spent years on the case. They believe Anderson then got a gun and drove up to the car carrying Tupac and Suge Knight. It had stopped at a red light at Flamingo and Koval. It was around 11 p.m. when the shots rang out. Tupac's car and the other cars in their group sped down Flamingo, turned onto the Strip, and tried to turn left onto Harmon, but spun out in the intersection. Retired Metro Sergeant Chris Carroll was on bike patrol and was first on the scene.
So as soon as the cars came to a stop, almost all the doors in the cars flew open and a bunch of guys came out.
He started asking everyone what happened while pointing his gun at them, but no one talked. After the situation calmed down, that's when Carroll noticed someone in the passenger seat. He ordered him out of the car, but nothing happened. Carroll then opened the passenger door and Tupac started to tumble out.
So I grabbed him with my left hand and lowered him to the pavement, and I could see immediately he had been shot multiple times. There was a lot of blood all over his torso. I knew it was in bad shape.
Carroll says he saw blood was coming out of Tupac's mouth and knew he was almost out of time. He tried to get information, anything, before Tupac blacked out.
And I looked at him and I said, "Who shot you?" And he looked at me and he was trying to get his breath together, and I thought I was going to actually get some cooperation. So he looked back at me and he said, "F you." And after he said that, his eyes kind of rolled back. He started to gurgle, and he lost consciousness.
Tupac went into surgery at UMC, but never regained consciousness. Word spread quickly in the music world.
I mean, I was at home with my wife, came across the news, and we start to call people we knew that knew him, just trying to get information.
We actually were at the MGM. I seen the fight. I seen it all happen. We went to this club. We were waiting in line, and all of a sudden, we seen people running up the street talking about Tupac got shot.
This was a drive-by shooting where he was murdered on the Strip. That sort of thing doesn't happen in Las Vegas. And it was something that really shook up the community, shook up the image of being in Vegas.
6 days later, Tupac came off life support and died. Millions of fans began to mourn. This all happening as the investigation forged on. All clues led back to the man from the fight, Orlando Anderson.
Well, actually, we do pretty much know who shot him, and that's Orlando Anderson. Orlando Anderson himself was murdered not long after Tupac.
Anderson killed in an unrelated shooting in Los Angeles. In 2006, the case was reinvestigated, this time by LAPD as part of the murder of rapper Notorious B.I.G. Retired detective Greg Kading, who worked in law enforcement for 25 years, says his investigation also identified Anderson as the shooter. He says Anderson's uncle, Keefe D., confessed to police he was there in Las Vegas and gave his nephew the gun.
The strength of the lead was really based on Keefe D's confession about being involved in the murder and about giving a gun to his nephew, Orlando.
Kading revealing this information in a book he wrote titled Murder Rap, Inside the Biggie and Tupac Murders. Anderson's uncle making these confessions after making an agreement his testimony could not be used against him.
It becomes a very problematic prosecution, and they recognize that, so there's not much else that can be done.
This case has left many friends and fans of Tupac wanting some sort of justice. Kading says there won't be any judicial justice, but he says there is some closure in this case.
If you're looking for closure, all the facts and evidence are there to give you a clear understanding of what happened and why it happened. And then the fact that Orlando Anderson died in the same manner that Tupac died, it's almost like perfect justice.
A violent night in southern Nevada that would be remembered around the world, as would Tupac's message.
I'm not saying I'm going to rule the world or I'm going to change the world, but I guarantee that I will spark the brain that will change the world, and that's our job.
His songs. And his impact on the world.
I miss, having another MC out there, who would, set a bar. You know what I mean? He would set some bars, I would set bars. It was cool to see somebody out there as good as me.
A never-ending tribute since his death, Tupac's friends and loved ones have continued to remember and honor the artist. 13 Action News anchor Ross DiMattei shows you the memories that still stay with those who knew him well.
No matter where Tupac Shakur went, controversy followed. He had brushes with the law and was put behind bars more than once. The rapper was also portrayed by some as a violent and troubled young man. But for those who knew him best, there was more to the rap icon.
Yeah, me and Pac was cool. We were learning from each other in the game. I think he was learning from me and I was learning from him.
I just try to make sure, whatever I'm involved in is going to be something positive and focus on more of the positive aspect of his life and, his mission.
When somebody told me about Tupac, I was thinking, this brother's going to be doing this for like 40 or 50 years, and every decade he's going to bring a crazy change.
Tupac also had a sensitive and poetic side. Longtime friend Jada Pinkett Smith sharing an example of that on his 50th birthday this past June. In the video, Jada reads from the poem titled Lost Souls.
When the purest hearts are torn apart, lost souls are all that's left. Down on my knees, I beg of God to save me from this fate. Let me live to see what was gold in me before it's all too late. Pac.
Fans continue to remember him through the messages in his songs and interviews, while his friends continue to remember moments they will cherish forever and honor his long-lasting legacy.
Because I saw him and Old Dirty Bastard at the same concert backstage. And we was performing. Biggie was performing too that day. But we was all there performing. And I got a chance to holler at both of them backstage and just see a different side of those dudes, you know, the real human side.
We're actually putting the finishing touches on the One Nation album. Right now, as we speak, and it should drop September 13th. We really went and tried to get as many people in hip-hop that are, looking to push the culture forward in a positive way and get them all on this album. And that was one of Pac's missions, one of his last missions, and so hopefully we did a good job with it.
Ross DiMattei, 13 Action News.
Coming up on Lost Soul, leaving a lasting impact on music.
The reason why it has lasting power is because he connected. When you speak from the heart and you speak the truth, you connect with people.
Hear from local DJs about the rap icon's legacy and what Tupac means to them. Welcome back. The hip-hop industry was flipped upside down 25 years ago. Amazingly, 25 years later, Tupac is still impacting music. Good Morning Las Vegas anchor Kalina Estrino spoke with local DJs about the legacy of the rap icon.
He was a voice for our generation.
He was just way ahead of his time. Revolutionary is what I would say about Tupac.
Local DJs say Tupac Shakur's words still touch people young and old.
The reason why it has lasting power is because he connected. When you speak from the heart and you speak the truth, you connect with people. And I think his greatest attribute was his ability to communicate and show a side of unselfishness.
I remember when Tupac was getting was going to the radio station when I was an intern, 14, 15 years old, and begging for his music to get played by one of our DJs by the name of Sway, who was on MTV, who has his own syndicated show on Sirius XM. I seen the growth of Tupac.
DJ Franzen works at Dre's nightclub and the Real 103.9. He says Tupac's legacy goes beyond his music.
He just made an impact till this day. You can be 21, you could be 51. You know what he was speaking back in the 90s is still relevant till this day.
Michael Mike P. Perry is a DJ for Hot 97.5 and remembers seeing Tupac at MGM just before the shooting.
We all went up to UMC. It was like a Martin Luther King Day parade. It was a bunch of people.
He says the artist is even more popular today than he was in 1996. From California Love to Keep Your Head Up to Dear Mama, there are songs many can relate to.
Okay, so back in the day, I was a real womanizer. So my first song I'm putting on is I Get Around. Oh my God, man, I had that song on repeat 1,000,000 trillion times.
There is a Tupac song on All Eyes on Me on the double album that came out in 1996, which went diamond, over 10 million records sold, probably at 20 million now. And it's the only song on that entire album with no curse words. It's called Heaven Ain't Hard to Find. And if you really listen to this song, you'll know what this guy Tupac was really about.
For Mike and DJ Franzen, his songs painted a picture of his life and took you on a journey into his world.
Tupac said that he was going to inspire people. And I've been on the radio here 20 years. And I'm one of the people that he inspired. I go to penitentiaries, I go to juvenile halls, and I speak to kids, and I got that Tupac spirit.
And that spirit is one that lives on through the legacy he left behind. Kalina Estrinos, 13 Action News.
Well, coming up on Lost Soul, from sergeant to celebrity status, the unintended consequence from being the first officer on scene. Stay with us. Welcome back. The murder of Tupac has had one completely unintended consequence. It's made a celebrity out of the retired Metro Police Sergeant who was first on the scene. Even 25 years later, Tupac's biggest fans can spot Chris Carroll right away. A family I can only describe as starstruck interrupts our interview with retired Metro Sergeant Chris Carroll. When the Turners from Mississippi approached us, we were actually talking about the very thing that's made Carroll a familiar face to Tupac fans. The fact he was the last person to speak with him. How old are you?
I'm 39.
Okay, so you were about 14 years old when Tupac...
96, yeah, that was in 96.
Yeah.
I remember what I was doing. I was at a party in the backyard when he died. So I remember everything about it.
Marcus Turner calls Tupac's rhymes and beats the soundtrack of his youth and has watched every documentary done on Tupac Shakur, trying to get to the bottom of who murdered who he calls a music prophet. He recognizes former Metro Sergeant Chris Carroll from countless interviews and knows Carroll had Tupac's final human interaction, the last man to hear his voice.
He was like a prophet. A lot of things that are going on now, he spoke about back then, you know, so that's what we know him from. We grew up on Tupac. That's what I grew up on. That's how I know so much about it.
The bright spotlight cast by such a notorious murder case seems to be more relevant now for Chris Carroll than 25 years ago. Did this incident change your life?
Not for a while. You know, I couldn't really talk about it until I was retired because, you know, when you work for the police department, they, you know, when you speak, you represent the police department. So it wasn't my place to say anything until I retired. So I don't think it's really changed my life. I never thought it would lead to the amount of press and interviews and things like that. You know, it's changed my life a little bit, maybe because of all that stuff.
For countless fans like Marcus Turner, he wants to thank Chris Carroll for keeping Tupac's music and memory alive by recounting that fateful night. You have anything to say to the detective?
No, I thank him for the job that he did.
All right, my friend.
Great job. You know, good to see you. I'm here with a super song.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know about that, but
yeah,
that's all.
yeah, I know your face. I'm a long way from. I'm 22 hours away from driving.
Oh,
That's
so
amazing.
If I know you, I know a lot of more people know you. So,
you know,
hey,
You're like an icon.
Yeah, I think. Keep up the good job.
All right, man. Take
All
care.
right,
Good
thanks.
talking.
Yeah, we got interrupted several times during that interview because so many people recognized him. We'll be right back after this break.
He had his own technique on how he was going to bring about change, and in the 90s, he brought that change about. And he was the first multi-faceted, you know, superstar in rap music and hip-hop.
This man accomplished so much in 25 years. Remember, he was 25 years old when he died. Look at all the things he did as an artist. Look at all the music he put out. Look at the movies he was involved in, the poetry, the books. Tupac was a genius.
It wasn't just rapping, you know, it wasn't just to make words rhyme. It was mainly to make it poetic, you know. And if you look at the song Changes, the way that he describes the storyline, Brenda's Got a Baby, it was mainly to send a message rather than to just sell records. And I feel like that's why it's still so important to this day.
And welcome back to the second half hour of our news special called Lost Soul, 25 years since the murder of Tupac Shakur. The Mob Museum honored the legacy of Tupac with a panel discussion, a candid conversation about what happened the night he was shot and the role gang activity played in his death. 13 Action News reporter Alicia Patillo shows you how they remembered the rap icon.
A night to remember one of the greatest rappers to ever live. The Mob Museum putting together an all-star panel including rappers Edie Mean and Chuck D and former journalist Stephanie Frederick to discuss the life and death of Tupac Shakur.
Well, the case is still talked about 25 years later because Tupac was an icon. He was beloved, right? He was an extremely talented individual.
The One Night in Las Vegas panel discussion was held at the Mob Museum ahead of the 25-year anniversary of the murder of Tupac. The Mob Museum bringing together former journalist and film producer Stephanie Frederick, former LAPD officer Frederick Reynolds, Public Enemy co-founder and rapper Chuck D, and E.D.I. Mean, who was a member of Tupac's hip-hop group, The Outlaws.
Actually, if you're a Tupac fan, you know him very well because he put everything in the music. It wasn't a guy, he wasn't really in the innuendo. So if you listen to the music, you knew Tupac.
At that time, when the incident happened, I was angry. He had his own technique on how he was going to bring about change, and in the 90s, he brought that change about. And he was the first multi-faceted, superstar in rap music and hip-hop. There had been others that actually acted in films, but he was an actor for true. He was a writer for true, a poet for true, and he was a rapper MC and a stage handler for true. He was able to bring all these things together, and that's why people could not take their eyes and then their ears off of him.
The panel explored the events leading up to the rap star's tragic death, sharing their thoughts about the investigation that followed and why there should have been justice in the case.
It should not be unsolved at all. If Tupac was just an average individual, average gang member, that case would have been solved. There would have been arrest made. I think because of the fame of Tupac, they were afraid of the case, to be honest with you.
Former Detective Reynolds says LAPD arrested Orlando Anderson, the man detectives on the case say shot Tupac. Anderson was arrested for a different murder charge right before he died. However, Reynolds claims the Los Angeles DA wouldn't file the charges, despite having a witness and the murder weapon.
District Attorney refused to file the case because, quote, Anderson is too hot right now. We need overwhelming evidence before we can proceed this case. And when I say Anderson is too hot, they don't want to touch him because his name was associated with the Tupac Shakur investigation.
The fans who came out to listen and learn did so to keep Tupac's memory alive. For those who called him a friend, they say the rap icon's legacy and influence will continue to live on in his music.
He knew how to at least present 100% authenticity. Right. He had to be 100%. He was not. Matter of fact, he's a little bit 125%. You know what I'm saying? Pac was 125%. I used to say, listen, man, you could knock 25% off of that 100, off of that 125.
Alicia Batillo, 13 Action News.
Well, when it comes to Tupac and his music, he is forever tied with East Coast rapper Notorious B.I.G., and a local barber and DJ have heard it all when it comes to this debate.
What it is who's the best rapper out of Tupac and Biggie? Of course, Jay-Z's in there too, but as the ones we're not here anymore. And then we go song for song. Okay, Tupac had this. Okay, Biggie had this. All right, Tupac album, his double album was better than Biggie's double album. You know what I mean? So that is the big conversation of who had more substance.
And it's funny because, before all this so-called East Coast, West Coast beef happened, they were great friends. They used to go to parties together. They used to rap together. They made songs together. And I wish they could have did an album together. That's like one of my main wishes, back in those days. If that beef never happened, I just wish they would have made an album or more music together.
Tupac and Biggie were a part of rival recording labels. Biggie was on Bad Boy Records on the East Coast, while Tupac was on Death Row Records. And as you just heard, they started off as friends in the industry before becoming rivals. Tupac, of course, died in 1996, and Biggie was shot and killed in California on March 9th, 1997. And Suge Knight was the owner of Death Row Records, but before being one of the biggest faces in hip-hop, he had quite the connection to Las Vegas. He played football for UNLV, then he transitioned to the business, but since then, his life has taken a different turn. He now sits in prison and is dealing with serious health issues.
I think it's a life gone to waste. You know what? This guy had so much potential. He's a college football player. I mean, he had a business that could have skyrocketed. Unfortunately, because of his crimes and his behaviors, he basically ruined his life. And now he's sitting in jail facing a murder charge with a strong likelihood that he's never gonna get out of prison alive.
Knight is currently in Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego County. Well, many have theorized for years that Tupac Shakur is still alive somewhere. Well, a local filmmaker is putting that idea into a movie that is still in production. And we spoke with him last year about what he believes actually happened that night after the Mike Tyson fight. Part of Tupac's legend is that he had been shot 5 times and survived before one night here in Las Vegas in 1996. That's why his death was hard to accept for many of his fans. However, a local filmmaker says Tupac's connection to Las Vegas shouldn't be about his death, but rather where he made his great escape.
Going straight to the point. After the shooting, what's next?
Most people would agree with official reports that after being shot, rap icon Tupac Shakur was taken to UMC, where he died 6 days later. But local filmmaker Rick Boss has an alternate ending.
This movie is about Tupac actually escaping from the University Medical Center here in Vegas and relocating to New Mexico, getting protection from the Navajo tribe.
Boss says when the rapper arrived to Las Vegas for fight night, he was allegedly informed of a planned hit on him. That's when the escape plan came into fruition, from planting a Tupac double in Suge Knight's BMW to a strategic aerial exit.
When certain FBI agencies are looking for you, the first thing they're going to do is block the airport so you can't travel out. So the best way to escape is through helicopter, private helicopter, to another state.
FBI agents can't go onto tribal land without the tribal council's permission. Boss says that's why Navajo land in New Mexico made for the perfect hideout. While many may dismiss the premise as fiction, Boss says the information for the script came from people in Tupac's family and circle.
I mean, you can write a fiction story, but this is not fiction. This is facts through certain people that I know.
Boss says he knows G Money and Snoop Dogg, who collaborated with Tupac. Boss's father knew Tupac's mother from their involvement in the Black Panthers Party. Boss says he wants Tupac fans to see the movie and decide for themselves. The man who plays Tupac in the film, Richard Garcia, says he believes the rap legend did die in Las Vegas in 1996 at the age of 25, but says his legacy is still very much alive.
He's gone, but he lives on, like you said, like his mother said. He lives on through all of us, through our memories, through our hearts, through our tribute.
And this film, Tupac, The Great Escape from UMC, was expected to come out sometime this year. However, Boss recently posted on social media that due to the pandemic, the film has been put on hold for now. Well, 9 years ago, Tupac was revived through new technology. At the time, Digital Domain helped create a hologram of the legend at Coachella 2012 after Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg came to them with the idea.
Dre and Snoop come to DD with we have an idea, right? And that early impetus. And in fact, there's a great little sort of BTS piece that documents some of that and, shows them all, riffing and thinking about, what could be done.
John Canning with Digital Domain says they get people that come to them for visual effect. They come up with the idea of using someone that act out like they are Tupac and then just swap out the person's face with Tupac's face through visual effects. Canning says it was cool to see the fans' reactions.
We love doing our job in the sense where people are delighted by what they see. They're amazed. They're blown away. I often say that if we do our job really well, you don't know we did our job, right? That it fades away. The CG work isn't seen as CG work. It's just somebody's like, oh my God, that's so-and-so. And that's the joy, right? It's an artist where they're like, we did it really well. And people were like, what is that?
Now the hologram or digital face can be used again, but it comes down to Tupac's estate to decide when they want it to be used. Well, coming up on Lost Soul, 25 years since the murder of Tupac Shakur, bridging generations with music.
I think he is actually more well-known now than he was the night that he died. The younger generation, people who weren't even alive then, like you said, the kid's 17, they all know who Tupac is.
How Tupac's popularity continues to grow, even with new generations who were born after his death. Plus, back in Las Vegas and on sale, how much the car Tupac was riding in when he was murdered is going for. That and more on Lost Soul after this break. Welcome back. Tupac was more than an outlaw. He was more than a rap legend. He was also a successful actor. Tupac had roles in movies such as Poetic Justice with Janet Jackson, the film Gang-Related, and even the movie Juice that featured a young Omar Epps. Our ABC affiliate in Los Angeles spoke with Tupac and the cast of Juice back in 1992.
Is a modern day Shakespearean tragedy, just like that, and it's about ambition. That's what it's about. As if it was Macbeth or King Lear or any of that, it's Juice. It's a modern day, and it just happens to have a black cast, and it just happens to be all that.
We were trying to tell a real street story.
Tell it, brother.
And there's no possible way we could do it real without violence. Violence is out.
This is a push for our young black males. This is for y'all, from me to y'all. A kick in the butt to say, you know,
do something.
We, you know what I'm saying, do something with your life. I understand the circumstances that you're in, because all of us, I came from Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, just like everybody else. I could give the ghetto story, but I'm doing something. You know what I'm saying? Positive juice.
Well, Tupac performed in Shakespeare plays while at the Baltimore School for the Arts and even studied poetry, jazz, and ballet. He helped open doors for more rappers to star in movies. And many who grew up listening to Tupac have great memories of listening to his music, but people who were born after his death still have a connection with the rapper.
The younger generation, people who weren't even alive then, like you said, the kid's 17, they all know who Tupac is. You know, my daughter and her friends, they all know who Tupac is. I think pretty much everyone does, and I don't see that changing for a long time.
And during our interview with retired Sergeant Chris Carroll, a young Tupac fan stopped by to take some pictures as well. And he was wearing a Tupac shirt that read Poetic Justice. Well, coming up on Lost Soul, picture yourself rolling in a 1996 car.
And it's certainly been a nice marketing tool. It does get a lot of people that just want to come in and look at it, but that's okay. You know, it gets our name out there and people know who Celebrity Cars is, and you know, it couldn't hurt.
How much the car that Tupac was in will cost you and the mystery it has inside. Welcome back to Lost Soul, 25 years since the murder of Tupac Shakur. Fans still mourning Tupac 25 years after his death gravitate toward anything that connects them to him. And one of those things is the car in which Tupac was shot. It's a black BMW, still here in Las Vegas at a local car dealership. The general manager of Celebrity Cars tells us about the state of the vehicle and its allure to collectors.
This is where Tupac was when he was murdered that night 25 years ago. He sat right here, Suge Knight driving the vehicle. This is so bizarre. This is the original seat that Tupac was in. Wow.
One car, one legendary murder mystery in Las Vegas. Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight were riding in this black BMW on September 7th, 1996, when Tupac was gunned down in the passenger seat.
It's been a long time. I was born here. I grew up here. I remember that happening, but yeah, it's flown by for sure.
The BMW was a car leased to Death Row Records, the label owned by Suge Knight.
So when it was totaled and shot up, it went through back to a salvage yard, fixed up, probably didn't really know it was going to have any historical significance at that point. It was fixed and then sold to the general public, probably at an auction, something like that.
Ryan Hamilton, general manager of Celebrity Cars, says it was sold multiple times and several people drove around in it, not knowing the history it carried, until nearly 2 years ago, when a local collector realized what it had. Now Celebrity Cars is selling it for $1.5 million.
We get all kinds of interest. We've definitely had some serious buyers and some serious offers on it. With the pandemic, has definitely slowed some things down of people being a little bit more careful with their money.
The intrigue with this car has the same dimensions as the popularity of Tupac's music. It's global.
We've had actually a lot of international interest, and those tend to be the more serious buyers. It is a worldwide phenomenon of what Tupac is and what he did.
That has created a lot of buzz for the Las Vegas company.
We've worked with the Pawn Star guys on it, so that's gotten a lot of press for it. It's gotten us some worldwide notoriety of people that wouldn't know we exist otherwise, and it's certainly been a nice marketing tool.
Hamilton says he understands the fascination and allure of the car because it's a story that people are drawn to. But the car has its own mystery as well.
There was actually a hidden weapon compartment in the side door, which is still there. We still haven't opened it.
That's right, a secret compartment.
And this is a normal one. So this one's sealed.
It's on the driver's side door. Hamilton says that it is sealed and appears to have a mechanical release for it. He says he believes Suge Knight used it to store a gun.
It definitely was probably a firearm at some point. I think it's probably just sealed up at this point. I don't think there's probably anything in it, but it's, your guess is as good as mine, I guess.
We asked retired Sergeant Chris Carroll if anything was ever found in there.
It's clearly a place where you could have hid a weapon, but none was found that night. Whether they ditched a gun between the shooting location and here, which is a little over a mile, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. The world will never know.
But Hamilton feels it's just something else that makes this an important historical collector's item. And he expects the value of the BMW to continue to increase over time, especially on this 25-year mark.
I would compare it to a piece of art. I wouldn't compare it to a typical car. It's not going to have a depreciation. The depreciation of the car really has nothing to do with it. It should grow over time.
Well, Tupac lives on through his music and words, he said, but also memorabilia. Places like the Grammy Museum have continued to honor his legacy. The museum put up an All Eyes on Me exhibit in 2015 that celebrated the life and legacy of Tupac. But that wasn't the only place that honored the artist. Here in Las Vegas, the Hard Rock Hotel had a display with the clothes he wore the night he was shot. The Hard Rock Hotel closed last year, but the Hard Rock Cafe still has a collection. Las Vegas has also honored the rap icon in many different ways, including through art. Local wall muralist Juan Ochoa, or Latin artist, made this mural last year at the Moulin Rouge Hotel. It includes portraits of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Tupac. The fire at the Moulin Rouge damaged the MLK portrait, but Tupac still stands to this day. He is proud of his work, especially since Tupac wasn't in the original plans.
It was the Black Lives Matter. They really wanted MLK because it was all about peace. And they were also wanting to incorporate Malcolm X, but the bridge in between Malcolm X and MLK was kind of Tupac, somebody that was still peaceful, but somebody that still knew how to react when people provoked them. So it was somebody we really wanted to push. The fact that he died in this very city, it was a main reason why we also wanted him in the mural. And just for the fact that it was a historical ground that we were painting.
And Ochoa says growing up, he didn't know much about Tupac until his friend asked him to make a portrait of the rapper. He listened to the song Old School, which talks about making graffiti art, something Ochoa now gets paid to do. He says it's crazy how that song inspired him.
It was the album Me Against the World. Instantly, once I started listening to it, I just loved it, especially the song Old School. And the storytelling, it really puts the imagination in your head, and you feel like you could understand everything that's going on through what he's saying. But it was pretty much saying disregard school, hit the streets and do graffiti. And I'm like, damn, that's what it was about back in the day. That sounds sick. And then looking back at it, like I'm literally just right after leaving high school, I just started becoming a professional graffiti artist. And then like, this is the mirror that's also getting attention, and it was a Tupac, you know, like that song literally inspired me to do a portrait of Tupac.
Yeah, Ochoa says he wants to do more Tupac murals in the near future. We'll be right back after this break.
To some people, Pac was the biggest rapper, best rapper.
Wasn't about being a lyricist or, you know, all the other. He really spoke from his heart, and people felt him.
Tupac was passionate and poetic with his words. He knew how to inspire people, especially communities of color. He advocated for racial and economic equality in a way that many others couldn't. He advanced the hip hop culture in such a short period.
We were young when we first met, happy to be rapping in front of people. You know, it wasn't even like we was happy people was listening. We was happy we had records. We was happy we was doing shows on the road, tearing up hotels, having fun.
Tupac will go down in history as the greatest entertainer, one of the greatest entertainers of all time. When you listen to his music, when you listen to the message in his music, you know, the lyrics, so much of what he was talking about 25 years ago, 30 years ago, still resonates today.
That is so true. And that does it for this 13 Action News special, Lost Soul, 25 years since the murder of Tupac Shakur. We want to thank everyone who spoke with us on this somber anniversary for the music industry. Thanks for joining.